Hello, today we are going to do some watercolor exercises using the paper included in your kit and the watercolors that you have. You will also today need some clean water. A good sized container like this is great. You can use um, a bowl from your kitchen. The watercolors are non-toxic, so it's fine to use something that you're going to wash out well afterward. You'll need your watercolors, 2 paintbrushes, your large and small one included in your kit, something to mix your paints in. I'm using a plastic palette for mixing, so if you have one of these, that's great. If not, you can use a dinner plate. You can use cardboard, a piece of cardboard to mix on. You can use a paper plate if you have it. You'll need some salt. So if you have salt at your dinner table, I have a little container here, so just standard table salt is fine, or if you have some in your kitchen. If you have thicker salt, that could work as well, and I'll explain what that's used for in a minute. You need a ruler, and you are going to use your smallest size paper included with your watercolor paper. You have 3 different pieces. This is your smallest piece. This piece measures 8 inches by 7 inches. So what you're going to do is come and measure the length of the paper here, and you are going to measure out 8 boxes. So I'm making a line across this way, and then I'm going to make 2-inch boxes. So I'm going to count 2, 4, 6, okay. The purpose of making 2 lines is that it gives me a nice straight line here. And then I want you to number these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. For box 5, you are going to break this up into 6 sections. So you can take your ruler, and this does not have to be perfectly even, so you can kind of just eyeball 3 sections to start with, like that, and then just make a quick line down the middle. Again, does not have to be perfectly even. Ooh, that's really uneven, but that's okay. We are just going to experiment with little color mixing here. Okay. The other section that you need to break up into 3 sections is section 6. So I'm going to have you break that up. And you should be labeling red, yellow, blue. Okay, the first technique that we are going to do is called a wash. So you're going to dip your brush into your water. I recommend your larger brush, and choose a color. For these exercises, you might want to try a variety of colors, or if you know for your project you really want to use, greens and blues, maybe you stick with that for this. I'm not too concerned about what colors you use. So to create a wash, you are going to wet your paper. Make sure water is nice and clean. And then you're going to take your damp brush and dip it into your color of choosing. So I'm going to choose a nice blue here, and I'm going to kind of move the brush back and forth in my paint, and then I'm going to apply it to the paper. Because the paper is wet, it's going to spread easily over the page. This is a great way to cover a large area. You can certainly make it darker and heavier, but it should be a nice smooth color. Then my instructions, and you should be following along on the Google Doc, tell me to do this on square number 7 as well. Oops. So I'm going to wash my brush and make another wash on square 7. The reason you're doing square 7 is because you will be coming back and doing a glaze on that one later, so you need to let this dry. watercolor is water soluble, so it does not dry permanent. So you can go back and lift off some of the color. The colors, if they're put on together wet, they will kind of bleed together a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is called dropping in color. So that's number 2. Number 2 is similar to number 1. So you are going to make a wash of color, but this time we're going to see what happens when we put another color on top of it. This can be a nice way to create accent or variation. Let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit more. Then I'm going to take my water and choose another color. So I'm probably going to choose a color that works well with my blue, and it's looking a little green on the camera, but I'm going to take some purple and wet my brush, get that purple, and then I'm just dropping in droplets of that color. Because the paper is wet, you're going to see it kind of spread, which can be a really interesting and beautiful effect. I will show you what to do if you don't want that to happen, if you want to control the paint more. But that can certainly be interesting and useful in certain applications. So now I'm going to take my small brush and we're going to talk about doing dry brushing. So these first 2 exercises, we used the paint very wet. What if you want to get a more crisp line? Well, what you want to do is wet your brush. I'm using my smaller brush here, just enough so that you can wet the color, and then find the color that you'd like. And here I want you to try making a drawing with some larger and smaller details, just from your imagination. So I'm going to practice making a leaf. As you can see, it's very crisp. So draw whatever you'd like. It could be abstract shapes. You could use another color if you want to. If you go to switch colors, you want to wash your brush, dry it a little bit, and then get the brush wet again, and then dip into your other color, especially if you're switching to like yellow or a drastically different color. See what kind of marks you can make on the paper. When you dry brush, you tend to get more brilliant color too because it's less water happening. So try making a variety of lines and shapes here. So that is the dry brushing. Number 4 is a favorite of my students. So number 4 is salt. So here's an example of what it looks like once the salt has been removed. It gives you a kind of crystallized effect, which is really interesting for creating sky or just some nice variation on your page. So what you're going to do is, and you want your page to be nice and wet for this one. So you are going to create another wash. So this time maybe I'll use some green. So I'm going to wet the paper. This works better with like a darker color and also more saturated color. So I might do just the green. Maybe I'll even drop some color in. So I'm going to wash my brush again. I'll drop in some blues. Then while the paint is still quite wet, I'm going to take a little bit of my salt and sprinkle it on the page. And it's going to suck up all of the water, well, most of the water. You can be quite generous with the salt. And you'll get these little kind of almost like bleach marks from the salt, where the salt is sticking to the page, not the paint, and it will cause this cool kind of speckled pattern. Let that dry. You will not take that off until tomorrow. Now we're going to head down to number 5. Number 5 is color lightening. So how do you effectively lighten a color? You add water to it. So for this one, you're going to choose one color and practice your lightening technique. So for this one, I'm going to choose red. I'm wetting my brush and dipping it in my red paint. And then I'm going to paint my most saturated color here. I don't need to fill the entire square. I don't want these to bleed together, so it's actually probably better to not fill the entire square with the red. Then I'm going to put a little red into my palette over here. But add some water to it. And then I'm going to apply that next red to my paper. So it's just a little bit lighter than the first red. I might darken it up a touch. I'm going to take some more water on my brush and add it to my palette. And then I'm taking even more water on my brush and adding it to my palette. This exercise, if you don't have a palette, could be tricky because it does get the paint really watery, so you might want to use a little bowl if you have one in your kitchen. And then I'm adding even more water until I get the faintest of red, almost like a pink more, right? I might need to go back and add a touch more color to darken some of these up. So you should see a difference between them. If one does feel a little too dark, what you can do is come in with a little bit of paper towel. So if I feel that, I've gotten too dark here, I can take a little paper towel and pat it with the paper towel to relighten it, and then add a touch more water to it. Okay. You want to be careful not to rub the paper because you will start to kind of tear the paper and it will get pilled, which will not look good. The last 2 steps that I'm going to show you are mixing. Well, there's 3 steps actually. The last 3 I'm going to show you are mixing colors, glazing, and lifting off. So to mix color, we are going to try mixing our primary colors. You will again need a palette or something to mix in. You're not going to use as much water for this one. If your water is getting a little dirty, you might want to change it at this time too. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my red and put it into my palette. Then I need to rinse my brush off really, really well. And then I'm going to dip it into a tiny bit of green. Green is the complement of red. It is opposite on the color wheel. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a nice deep red color. If you're not a fan of the color or how dark it's gotten, you can rinse your brush and put a little bit more red in there. But the goal is to darken a color without just using black. Sometimes black can be overpowering. So see what happens when you use the color's complement or contrasting color. So there's a darker version of my red. Now I'm going to try it for my yellow. When you're doing a very light color, such as yellow, you need to be very careful about how much of the opposite color you put in. So now I have my yellow. I don't know, you can't see it very well. It looks more like white on the camera. And then I'm going to take a tiny bit of purple and mix it in. And it already got too purpley. So now I'm going to take a little bit more water on my brush, clean my brush, and mix more yellow into the purple. There we go. And a little bit more here. So on camera right now, at least on my computer, this is looking more purple, but in front of me it really is looking quite yellow. It might just be the settings on my camera. So make sure that the color is more yellow than purple. If it's too purple, add more yellow to it. The last one I'm going to do is the blue. Put it in your palette or on your plate. And then I'm going to take a tiny bit of orange. So again, the complementary color. To create a nice deep blue. You certainly can use black, but I would always recommend using it sparingly, and using the complement can give you a nice range of color that you might not have otherwise been able to get with black, which can sometimes, again, be a little overpowering. For number 7, you're going to be creating a wash. So you choose a color that is analogous to the first color that you put down. So analogous means that it's next to it on the color wheel. So I chose blue. And because I have a blue here, I think green or a purple would look quite nice with it. So I'm going to put some water into my palette and then take a little bit of my green and water it down. And all I'm going to do is on half of this, put a thin layer. And I might add a little bit more water. A glaze is basically a way of layering 2 colors, but allowing each color to still be present. Excuse me. And you can't really see the effects until it dries, but close up I can see a little blue coming through the green. So it's a nice way of creating depth in your artwork. The very last technique I'm going to show you is lifting off. So you will create a wash on your page of one color. Lifting off can be used to create texture or variation, but it can also be used if you got too heavy with your paint. So you're going to make a wash, and then I want you to go in and kind of squish up either some paper towel, some toilet paper, and you're just going to pat the paper. This can also be a nice way to make clouds, or if you wanted to make water. And you're just going to go in and make a little bit of texture and kind of suck up some of the paint. So this is another way, if you get too dark, that you can go in and lighten as well. You can always, sometimes what I'll do is I'll make like a long piece with my paper towel, and I can just go in and kind of soak up some of the color if it gets too heavy or if it starts running. So that is your exercise. Once you are done, you should let it dry, remove your salt, put your name on the bottom, and take a photograph.